that would never hurt you. When he first began to walk far without a guide, he thought he would discover the further bounds of the land, but great mountains rose before him, and going by long ways round about them, he came at last to a desolate shore. He stood beside the sea of windless storm, where the blue waves and snow-clad hills fell silently out of unlight to the long strands, bearing the white ships that returned from battles in the dark marches of which men know nothing. He saw a great ship cast high upon the land, and the waters fell back in foam without a sound. The 11 mariners were tall and terrible. Their swords shone, and their spears glinted, and a piercing light was in their eyes. Suddenly they lifted up their voices in a song of triumph, and his heart was shaken with fear. And he fell upon his face, and they passed over him and went away into the echoing hills.
What happened?
He saw some soldiers coming off of a boat. See, actually, here's another picture. And they shouted awesome hurrah, and he got scared and fell down.
And then they walked all over him?
And they just walked past him.
Okay.
Did they not see him?
I don't know. They must have just thought he was unimportant.
They're hurrahing because they got into the fairyland.
No, I think they came back from a triumphant battle.
Mm.
After that, he went no more to that strand, believing that he was in an island realm beleaguered by the sea, and he turned his mind towards the mountains, desiring to come to the heart of the kingdom. Once in these wanderings he was overtaken by a grey mist and strayed long at a loss, until the mist rolled away, and he found that he was in a wide plain. Far off there was a great hill of shadow, and out of that shadow, which was its root, he saw the king's tree springing up, tower upon tower, into the sky, and its light was like the sun at noon, and it bore at once leaves and flowers and fruits uncounted, and not one was the same as any other that grew on the tree. He never saw that tree again, though he often sought for it. On one such journey, climbing into the outer mountains, he came to a deep dale among them, and at its bottom lay a lake, calm and unruffled, though a breeze stirred the woods that surrounded it. In that dale the light was like a red sunset, but the light came up from the lake. From a low cliff that overhung it he looked down, and it seemed that he could see to an immeasurable depth, and that he beheld strange shapes of flame bending and branching and wavering like great weeds in a sea dingle. And fairy creatures went to and fro among them. Filled with wonder, he went down to the water's edge and tried it with his foot, but it was not water. It was harder than stone and sleeker than glass. He stepped on it, and he fell heavily, and a ringing boom ran across the lake and echoed in its shores. At once the breeze rose to a wild wind, roaring like a great beast, and it swept him up and flung him on the shore, and it drove him up the slopes, whirling and falling like a dead leaf. He put his arms about the stem of a young birch and clung to it, and the wind wrestled fiercely with them, trying to tear him away. But the birch was bent down to the ground by the blast and enclosed him in its branches. When at last the wind passed on, he rose, saw that the birch was naked. It was stripped of every leaf, and it wept, and tears fell from its branches like rain. He set his hand upon its white bark, saying, "Blessed be the birch. What can I do to make amends or give thanks?" He felt the answer of the tree pass up from his hand. "Nothing," it said. "Go away. The wind is hunting you. You do not belong here. Go away and never return." As he climbed back out of that dale, he felt the tears of the birch trickle down his face, and they were bitter on his lips. His heart was saddened as he went on his long road, and for some time he did not enter Fairy again. But he could not forsake it, and when he returned, his desire was still stronger to go deep into the land. At last he found a road through the outer mountains, and he went on till he came to the inner mountains, and they were high and sheer and daunting. Yet in the end he found a pass that he could scale, and upon a day of days, greatly daring, he came through a narrow cleft and looked down, though he did not know it, into the vale of Evermorn, where the green surpasses the green of the meads of outer fairy, as they surpass ours in our springtime. There the air was so lucid that eyes can see the red tongues of birds as they sing on the trees upon the far side of the valley, though that is very wide and the birds are no greater than wrens. On the inner side the mountains went down in long slopes filled with the sound of bubbling waterfalls, and in great delight he hastened on. As he set foot upon the grass of the vale he heard elven voices singing, and on a lawn beside a river, bright with lilies, he came upon many maidens dancing. The speed and the grace and the ever-changing modes of their movements enchanted him, and he stepped forward towards their ring. Then suddenly they stood still, and a young maiden with flowing hair and kilted skirt came out to meet him. She laughed as she spoke to him, saying, "You have become bold, Starbrow, are you not? Have you no fear what the queen might say if she knew of this, unless you have her leave?" He was abashed, for he became aware of his own thought, and knew that she read it, that the star on his forehead was a passport to go wherever he wished, and now he knew that it was not. But she smiled as she spoke again. "Come, now that you are here, you shall dance with me." And she took his hand and led him into the ring. There they danced together, and for a while he knew what it was to have the swiftness and the power and the joy to accompany her. For a while. But soon it seemed they halted again, and she stooped, and took up a white flower from before her feet, and she set it in his hair. "Farewell now," she said. "Maybe we shall meet again, by the Queen's leave."
Well, what about his wife?
He has a wife. She doesn't go with him, though, I don't think. He remembered nothing of the journey home from that meeting until he found himself riding along the roads in his own country. And in some villages people stared at him in wonder and watched him till he rode out of sight. When he came to his own house, his daughter ran out and greeted him with delight. He had returned sooner than was expected, but none too soon for those that awaited him. "Daddy," she cried, "where have you been? Your star is shining bright." When he crossed the threshold, the star dimmed again, but Nell took him by the hand and led him to the hearth, and there she turned and looked at him. "Dear man," she said, "where have you been, and what have you seen? There is a flower in your hair." She lifted it gently from his head, and it lay on her hand. It seemed like a thing seen from a great distance, yet there it was, and a light came from it that cast shadows in the walls of the room, now growing dark in the evening. The shadow of the man before her loomed up, and its great head was bowed over her. "You look like a giant, Dad," said his son, who had not spoken before. The flower did not wither nor grow dim, and they kept it as a secret and a treasure. The smith made a little casket with the key for it, and there it lay, and was handed down for many generations in his kin. And those who inherited the key would at times open the casket and look long at the living flower till the casket closed again. The time of its shutting was not theirs to choose. So the flower closed its own lid. So here's a picture of him